Hey everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and today I'd like us to go through different versions of the same song. The first version is the first draft that I did of the song when it was kind of finished. Then the second draft of it after I do a little bit of a mix balance and a review. And then the third draft, which is my own master. And then the fourth draft, which is the professional master. The song in question is Radiant by Face the Sun, which was launched as part of my Melodic House course, which you can find here. But I think it can be really helpful to get some perspective on 4 versions of the same musical ideas, just worked out in maybe a more polished or better way. Once you hear the clean mastered version, you're going to see how it's obvious that in the first version there are problems, when maybe in the first version you didn't necessarily identify them as problems. Let me just show you what I mean. Okay, here we go. Version 1 of the song. After my first work session, this was the first version. And I was pretty happy with this. Most of the musical ideas were on the page. There's definitely a storyline there. It's just that maybe a lot of mix decisions hadn't really been made yet. You know, I'd thrown a lot of things at the wall to see what stuck. And then after a round of feedback, it became this. On headphones, the difference is night and day. I'm gonna go back. Unmixed, let's call this. Mixed. Obviously a very different emphasis on different elements. So for example, an emphasis on the drums. Listen to the kick drum, right? Totally different. So in the version 2, there's a much more priority put on the boom, 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 you know, the thing that's supposed to keep the dance floor going. Whereas in version 1, the drums were the first thing that I did, and they got buried underneath all the synthesizers. You can barely hear them. So those are the 2 versions. Version 2 also has a lot more separation of elements. Elements are more placed in the mixing box in a much more logical places. Then I self-mastered this track, and this is what that sounds like. Versus this. This is not as much difference. There's very little difference between these 2 versions, maybe a few small polishings here and there, but fundamentally the self-master is just where I'm taking a little bit more patience to push it into the limiter a little bit. And I kind of set it as a reference point of what I would do if I was mastering it myself, versus the mastered track that I then got back from a professional, who's Stefan Brown from Artdecade Mastering. Their contacts are right here. Stefan Brown was kind enough to also provide a PDF with all the mastering moves that they did for this master. So that's included in the course. So shameless plug again, check out the course if that's of interest to you. But let's look at the difference between the self-master and the mastered version. Come from all the way over here to this. Pretty magnificent. So there you go. To refresh your memory, version 1 is unmixed, where just all the creative ideas are on the page. Version 2 is cleaned it up again and reprioritized things and gave them a more definite space in the mixing box. And then the master track is where that fairly well-balanced mix, then gets pushed a little bit into the limiter with a lot of things like saturation and a little bit of EQ and stuff like this to get a very kind of a pleasant, modern, commercial loudness out of it. A little side note about comparing mastered tracks. You notice that I compared my self-master to the mastered track, right? Because I already put a limiter on my self-master to see what that would sound like. I did a video on what the role is of the limiter in the workflow of the music producer right here. Check out that video. I think it's quite helpful. One of the things you'll sometimes see people do is compare a pre-mastered to a mastered version, which is, in my opinion, not a fair comparison, because a pre-master is where you take it's basically the same setup as the self-master, but without the limiter on there and with a whole lot of headroom. So it's just going to be really quiet and you get something like this. And then people will tell you, and now the mastered version sounds like this. And you're going to be like, whoa, the pre-master was dark, it was muddy, it was boring, it was quiet. And the real difference actually between these two versions is just a lot of decibels, right? That's the main difference. And then of course a few polishing tweaks, but the main difference between these two is volume. And so the more fair comparison is between the self-master and the mastered version. And there's quite a lot of difference in the way the elements relate to each other. In the mastered version, there's a lot more, I would say, saturation and compressed brightness to make the maximum loudness come out of this track, I guess. Anyway, you can make up your own mind about all of this. There is a lot of different ways of thinking about mixdown and mastering, or if something like objectively good even exists in a fundamentally subjective area like music. But in any case, here you saw the different stages of the track. And I hope this helps you identify a little bit how you should be thinking for yourself about creativity versus polish versus finalizing. When you want to maybe publish something, you see this is kind of the path that a project might go through. If you want to see how I thought about the creation of all of these elements, go follow my Melodic House course. Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with all of this. And until next time, stay producing, be good to one another, and take care. Bye-bye.